Welcome to the Coaching Revealed podcast series on leadership coaching. I'm one of the podcast hosts, Emily Tarani. In today's episode, I join Austin Matzel to interview Douglas Choo, a fellow and friend of the Institute of Coaching. Douglas, a seasoned executive coach, walks us through his transition from law and management consulting to coaching, a shift inspired by the guidance of renowned coach Carol Kaufman, one of the co-founders of the Institute of Coaching. Now thriving in his coaching sweet spot, Douglas shares the common challenges his clients face, from motivation hurdles to navigating tricky conversations. But how did Douglas find his sweetest sweet spot? Finding the time and self-leadership to create a mindful space between stimulus and response, this ability to pause before acting has helped Douglas find his passion in life, and he uses these skills to help clients find their passions. The highlight of today's episode, Douglas shares insights from his coaching playbook, My Prism, Mindful Leadership, How to Overwrite Your Autopilot, which is co-authored with fellow coaches and inspired by the collaborative spirit of the Institute of Coaching. It's a guide to find your sweet spot in crafting purposeful responses. Stay tuned as we delve into Douglas's 3-phase coaching method and unravel the secrets behind creating lasting change for his clients. Get ready for a coaching masterclass. Let's dive in. So welcome, Douglas. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So Austin, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, we're so appreciative to be able to be interviewing you today, talking about your experience as a coach and specifically as a leadership and executive coach. I would love to hear a little bit more about what type of coaching you do and what type of clients you work with.
I'm an executive coach, and most of my clients are senior leaders in the corporate world, but I also serve leaders who are in nonprofit organizations.
That's wonderful. And do you find a common thread coaching people from all different industries and different types of companies?
I must say yes. At that level of leadership, many of the issues that I have to coach them on are very common. It ranges from how to motivate people, how to create psychological safety, how to have difficult conversations. At that stage of their careers, many of them are actually dealing with issues like motivation. Very pivotal moment is when they come to me.
And how did you get into coaching in these specific industries?
I got into coaching really thanks to Carol Kaufman, the founder of IOC. When I was introduced to her about 5 years ago, after she got to know me a little bit about what I do for a living, she planted the seed in my head and suggested that I might actually enjoy coaching. Before coaching, I was a lawyer. And after that, I was a management consultant doing mergers and acquisitions. And my last formal role before full-time coaching was the head of strategy in a major insurance company. So that's how I got into coaching, thanks to Carol Kaufman.
And so you've had a bunch of different careers. What's led you to transition from one role to the other? And why did you decide to transition from being a consultant and a management consultant to a coach?
The short answer is I actually love what I do right now. I think I finally found my sweetest sweet spot, and I get a lot of energy from my clients right now. Without realizing it, I have been coaching all my career. So as a lawyer, I was advising clients on legal issues, but many times I'm also advising them on their cognitive issues and cognitive choices, especially in management consulting. As I became more and more senior in that profession, I was dealing with leaders who have to deal with very complex situations, both personally and organizationally. So becoming a full-time executive coach is actually quite a nice sort of ribbon around my professional life. And I'm having a great time.
It sounds like it was a natural progression and it was just making what you're already doing a formal title. So with that, did you get formal training?
Yes, I think the major difference is while I leverage a lot of my business experiences and theories around organizational change based on actual business experiences and case studies, I needed a formal part of coaching, which was really learning the science of human behavior. I needed to retool or at least enhance my tool set. I formally qualified to be an executive coach at Columbia University. And of course, I joined the IOC where my education and refinement continues. Again, Carol Kaufman during the COVID years started the weekly huddles, and both of you have been involved. That is a major forum for my continued learning in coaching. And along the way, I've accumulated other accreditations like the Intercultural Development Inventory.
When you have a client come in and you start working with them, how do you start building that coaching relationship and building towards the goals the client has?
My method, or the typical program that I run, can really be divided into 3 phases. The first phase is really helping the clients achieve a very high level of self-awareness. I call that baselining, right? So the client and I need to sort of have a common baseline on where are we working from. And a lot of it is self-awareness. And then once we establish that, and then we identify the priority areas that they want to work on, then I move on to, now that you've decided that this is who you are and what you want to work on, what are you going to do about it? I walk them through using all the different frameworks and methods, which I will talk about later. We develop options. And then the last phase of it is really holding them accountable for the stuff that they want to work on. So very typically, I would ask my clients to develop their own individual development plan. And then during sessions with me, we'll work through those plans and see what progress they are making against the goals that they've set for themselves. So typically 3 phases, right? So baselining, self-awareness, development, and then finally execution and accountability.
And on average, how long do these 3 phases last? How long do you typically work with a single client?
Change is hard, especially for highly successful executives, because they don't think that they need to change. So statistically, and again, based on my own experience, change starts around maybe the 4th or 5th month. And my typical engagement runs about 6 months. Yeah, I think if it's too short, it's very unrealistic to expect a client to just flip a switch. Of course, it happens. In the majority of the cases, it's typically around 6 months.
With that taking 4 to 5 months to kind of begin seeing that change occurring with your clients, as the coach, what signs do you look for to start noticing that your client seems like they're ready to begin changing?
What signs? Okay, typically they are the ones who come up with it. That's part of the joy of being a coach. You come to a session and then the clients are so excited to tell you, I have a breakthrough, this thing that we wanted to experiment. I did it and it worked. And so they are the ones who will be the first one to say, I have achieved that change that you want me to do. I also have a more methodical way of tracking progress. I actually created an Excel spreadsheet where I ask the clients to rank themselves, right? Every day, I ask them to ask themselves a question. Have you done your best to do this thing that you wanted to do, to change? And then they rate themselves. And then we will analyze the trend and say, well, why are you stuck at number 1 and not moving to 2 and 3? And how come for this particular task, you are striking 9th all the time? So what's the difference? And then I sort of analyze that almost scientifically, and then let them reveal for themselves what they might have to adjust.
Would you say that's your most effective coaching tool, or is there anything else that comes to mind?
I wouldn't say it is the most, because I rely on so many other tools, right? But it's something, it again depends on the coachee. Some people don't like to look at numbers in Excel spreadsheet, right? They just want to talk and they want to talk about their feelings. But some will say, well, actually, this is great because I can actually see how I need to adjust in terms of my behavioral choices. So no, Emily, I wouldn't say it's the most effective. It really depends on the coachee. Yeah.
When you're working with that coaching client, what are you mindful of for yourself to be making sure that you're bringing out the best in the individual client?
I have to resist a lot, going back to my old hat, which was being a consultant, being an expert, right? Coaching is different, at least the way I practice it. It's much more powerful if they discover it themselves. So the model that I use is actually based on a book that Carol Kaufman and David Noble wrote about. It's called Real-Time Leadership, and it's based on the MOVE model. right? M is the first acronym in MOVE, and it's mindfulness. So a lot of my method is based on helping the clients achieve a highest sense of, being mindfully alert about their own internal conditions, mindfully alert about their external goals, and mindfully alert about their impact on other people.
What sort of things do you do? Mindfulness is making me wonder about what you personally do to show up for your coaching clients.
Okay, I do this thing which I will be writing about with Carol Kaufman again, based again on real leadership. Carol and I are going to publish a book this fall, again by Harvard Business Review. It's called the Real-Time Leadership Playbook. Now, in the playbook, I talk about the 5 C's each time before I start a session. Right? The 5 C's, the higher I am in my C's, the more effective I can be, right? And then the most creative I can be. The first C is how calm am I right now before my session? How clear am I about what I need to be for my client at the session? How curious am I about what's going on or what my client has to say versus me just dying to say everything, right? How compassionate I am about my client and their issues. And finally, how courageous I will be in being a good mirror for my client who's come to me for coaching. 5 C's. I work on that all the time. For that, I'm grateful to Richard Schwartz, who is the original guru of the 8 C's. It's based on his method called the internal family system.
I know Schwartz also has this idea and sense of self within his work, specifically this concept of self-leadership, because self is able to lead all of the parts. So are you getting your clients to think about their own self-leadership then, would you say?
Oh, yes, for sure. In fact, funny that you mentioned self. I use other models and theories, right? For example, the theory of self-efficacy by Bandari, the theory of self-determination by Richard Ryan. So all these really help me in my coaching of my clients. So I don't just use one model. I rely on the wonderful Richard Schwartz work, the wonderful work done by Bandari, the wonderful work done by Richard Ryan. And of course, to anchor everything is positive psychology. And I love Boyatzie's work on that as well. So I don't just rely on one method, even though a lot of my practice is influenced by all this wonderful research and teachings from all these great masters before me.
Earlier, you were talking about how you've been learning so much through not only your own study and education and formal training as a coach, but also these informal opportunities, which is involving your time with the IOC in huddles and meeting other IOC coaches. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience being part of the IOC community.
Yes, I cannot be more grateful to IOC for the launch of my coaching practice. Again, the weekly huddles with fellows of the IOC, I think that's very powerful, right? The mutual learning that takes place, all the tricky cases that we talked about, the mutual supervision that goes on in our IOC huddles. I really benefited from that. And then you get ideas from just listening to your peers, books that I thought I've read, but there are more books to be read. That learning is just incredible. I gained so much from it, to the extent that I collaborated with 5 other fellows to write a book. Maribel Edelman, John Lazar, Beth Masterman, Fernando Moraes, and Rolf Pfeiffer, plus myself. 6 fellows came up with this ridiculous idea that we will write a book, put all our thoughts together, our collective coaching experiences and our practice, and come up with a framework. And we came up with the framework called My Prism, which is mindful leadership, how to override your autopilot. So that was really fun to do and humbling, but the 6 of us did it, and we're very proud of it and had a lot of fun doing it together.
How has it been for your practice being able to collaborate with other coaches? Because coaching can be a pretty isolated profession. So we'd just love to hear more about
I always find that I'm not alone, right? When I'm stuck or I think, wow, that's really a tricky situation. How would other coaches approach it? And there's no shortage of friends I can reach out to, peers I can reach out to. So no, I don't feel alone at all. Of course, I should also mention that it's really not a lonely journey, because in each session, the connection you feel that you form with your client is actually very deep, right? It's really a deep relationship of trust and psychological safety, which goes both ways. My clients make me feel that I can be my full self, right? And hopefully I reciprocate that. So you actually feel, at least for me, after each session, I'm actually energized rather than depleted. I get a lot of energy from connecting and empathizing with my clients and navigating their issues with them. So I don't really feel that coaching is a solo journey. Quite the opposite.
I love that. I'm wondering how you decide to work with a client. What is that first introductory call like?
The chemistry call is very, very important. I'm glad you're asking this question, because again, back to the theme of psychological safety, right? So if for whatever reason the client feel, well, Douglas is too verbose, or he's too pushy, or his style is not, then despite all the theories, despite all the great frameworks, it's not going to work. So that first chemistry call is very important, and it has to be mutual. I have actually been turned down, and clients decided not to work with me and pick another coach, for example. There's no science to it. It's just, the client and I both have to feel that we are going to be able to achieve a very high level of psychological safety. Otherwise, it wouldn't work.
And a follow-up question, how do you find clients?
I've been chided for not doing enough marketing. I've been lucky so far. Every one of my clients so far has been through referrals from, the most powerful referral really is from an existing client. A lot of clients who referred other people whom they felt would work well with me. So like I said, I coach partners in private equity firms. And through that, I started coaching more and more partners from other private equity firms, not just their own. So a lot of it is through referral. And another major referral, which is also very flattering, is from fellow coaches. I've had referrals from IOC fellows who felt that, based on what they know about my method and my style, they have referred clients, and I have done the same as well. So referral.
And to go back to kind of one of the earlier points you made, you were talking about how for you, coaching is this sweet, sweet spot. When it comes to working with your clients, are you helping them find their sweet, sweet spot? And if so, how does that feel?
There's actually a method that I use. So imagine 3 circles that overlap in the middle, right? So I actually do that with all my clients. In fact, the first circle, I ask them to list everything that they love to do. I encourage my clients to talk to people who they believe know them better than they know themselves. So I love to cook. I love to run. I love to read to my child. I love to swim. I like to be alone. Anything that you love, right? Then in another circle, you write all the things that you have experience in, that you are good at, right? I have been trained for myself. I've been trained as a lawyer. I was never trained as an accountant, but I have done mergers and acquisitions. And am I good at it? Well, most people will say that I'm pretty good at all this stuff, right? Then the last circle is, what am I good at, right? So I'm trained to do that. I've experienced it, but am I good at it? So then that is where you get a lot of feedback. Are you really good at what you are experienced in? So if you are in the sweet spot that you love to do, and you have experience in it, and you are very good at it, you are in your sweet, sweet spot. And if you are lucky to be there, then there's not much you need to change about your circumstances. So I'm very lucky that I find that I'm in my sweet, sweet spot. Why? Because after a lot of self-assessment and prompting, I discovered that I love to teach, right? Well, I've never been trained as a teacher, right? So there's a gap. I'm not trained as a coach, which prompted me to, hey, I need to go get some qualification, right? And then, are you good at it? Now, that's where the feedback comes in, and the referrals sort of, hints to me that, well, maybe you don't suck at it. So you're pretty good at what you do. So I find that being in executive coaching, I found myself in my sweet spot. So I've been very lucky. I'm one of those really lucky ones to be in my sweet spot.
Ready to advance your coaching practice? Join the Institute of Coaching and tap into the world's leading resource for coaching science and professional development. With over 4,000 members across 130 countries, the IOC offers invaluable networking opportunities with an elite global coaching community and innovative learning to broaden your knowledge and keep you at the forefront of coaching best practices. Engage in cutting-edge learning events with world-renowned coaching scholars, from webinars and seminars to discussion groups, research projects, and more. Try any membership free for 30 days. Use promo code IOC Podcast and visit instituteofcoaching.org/join to get started.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm wondering if you are working with a client and you're realizing that they're not in their sweet spot, in their leadership role, how does that dynamic go down? What happens with that client if they also realize they're not in a sweet spot?
If they realize that they are not in that sweet spot, then we go deeper and why. What do they need to adjust in order to be in that sweet spot, right? So for example, they're very good at what they do and they have experience and train in doing it. But really something about it they are not in love with. So then how can we adjust their perspective, or what do they love about what they do so that they get closer and closer to the sweet spot? There must be something that they love that they are not aware of. So for example, one client who was the CEO of a small community bank, she loves problem solving, right? And she loves to be around people who are smart and quick and wise. But, in her day-to-day job, she didn't realize that that's what she loved, right? So she's doubled down on the bank's performance, double down on everything that a banker needs to do, right? And just double down. So she's very good technically, very competent, definitely very experienced, right? So she thought that she was not in the sweet spot because she didn't do her first circle well. But if you double down on it and then you sort of unlayer the onion, then is there something about what you do right now that really appeals to your intrinsic motivation, appeals to your values? And then you double down on that. And that will help you move into that sweet spot. Now, of course, there's drastic cases where they find, well, actually, I hate what I do. Well, then that's a major transformation that needs to take place, right? That's a different conversation altogether.
So it sounds like you use this when you're recognizing that there's some dissatisfaction that a client's experiencing, and this is when you bring in the tool?
Well, I think that's why there must be something that the clients want to work on. That's why they come to me, right? So part of the role of the coach is to help them discover it, right? So we do psychometric assessments. So you help the client see what might derail you. What are your extreme defaults, right? When under stress, do you tend to micromanage? When under stress, do you withdraw more to yourself? When under stress, do you just lean back completely and be completely leisurely, right? And be passive aggressive. So we all have our extreme defaults and our derailers. The idea is to help the clients understand what those derailers are. What superpower do they have to bring themselves more to the middle path and away from the extreme defaults? And if you can do that, then you are always going to be in a position to have a purposeful response rather than an emotional reaction, right? That's a choice, the choice that you can train the brain to make. If you don't train your cognitive powers, your superpower is never unleashed. You're always likely going to default to your emotional reaction based on historical experiences. That's the autopilot that we talked about, right? I've always done it this way. This is the way I react. But why? Why do you react? Do you realize that actually you might have another choice, which is closer to your purpose rather than just default to an emotional reaction? And then when you help clients see that, it's very powerful. Everybody wants to be purposeful in their response, but until they are aware what derailed them, they will mistake their emotional reaction as a purposeful response. That might be another way, which is still true to my values and true to who I am, that I don't have to have this reaction. I can actually have a more purposeful response.
It sounds like you're having people take the time and space to be mindful and not just immediately react. And working with leaders and people who possibly have limited time and are in a very fast-paced environment, how do you convince them, or how do you get them to begin taking more time to be more mindful in their responses?
That space between a stimulus and response is not always just measured by number of seconds and actual period of time. The interruption is more important. Yeah. So let me give you an example, right? So every senior executive, very busy, right? Like I said, my clients, a lot of them are in financial institutions, like quick, fast-paced industry, private equity, right? So I have no time to go do mindful meditation, right? But I demonstrate to them, actually, you can achieve a very high level of mindfulness in 10 seconds. And I have a way of showing them that. Or let's say they want to I need to work on my listening skills, right? And they need to listen more than I talk. Then I come up with very tactical things where they will interrupt. So every time they talk, or they will put a check mark on their notebook. Then I make them look down on their piece of paper. If they find that every time they are talking, they're making a lot of checks. That means they are talking, and no zeros, which I ask them to use to indicate question. That means listening. Then they see that list, and it's a reminder. I need to stop talking now. So very tactical things. It doesn't have to be a long period of time. It can be just interruptions like that. And then you flip, consciously, mindfully switch your cognitive choice.
That's really interesting. A lot of people have this impression that mindfulness takes a lot of time. So you're teaching leaders who are particularly busy that it can just take a few seconds and it can totally transform their day.
You just reminded me of another quick thing that I tell my clients. I invented this, and I was inspired by Burt Bacharach's song made famous by Dionne Warwick, which is called Say a Little Prayer. Okay. I was inspired by that song. So I thought, okay, I can make that into a coaching tool, which is very fast and very quick, and it will create that interruption that we talked about. So when your anxious brain is in high gear, right? Before a very tense meeting, your anxious brain is in high gear, right? When your anxious brain is in high gear, you're less creative and you're more anxious, right? And you're more likely to default to emotional reaction. So let's calm the anxious brain down and elevate the learning brain. And you interrupt that with this little prayer. So I ask my clients, you name your anxiety. And then they say, well, what do you mean? I said, just give it a name. So let's make fun of Austin, right? They say my client's anxious, name her anxiety Austin. So I say, all right, every time you feel anxious, or every time you feel that you're about to step into a very tense situation, you say this prayer to yourself. Dear Austin, I know you are here to protect me. Thank you for being here. But I will be okay. That little prayer immediately, and I've had many clients tell me that it works. It immediately elevate their C's, immediately create that space between stimulus and response, and immediately they can find more calm, more curiosity, and then because they're acknowledging, they're actually being compassionate to their anxious brain. So it's all those principles that I talked about earlier on this call is triggered by this little prayer. Dear Austin, thank you for being here. I know you're here to protect me, but I will be okay.
I love that it's taking something that's fear-based and positioning it as gratitude.
Exactly. And then if you're kind to your own anxious brain, then you find that your anxious brain will step back. And when that step back, a more creative side of you will step forward. A more purposeful, responsive self will step forward rather than defaulting to their emotional anxious state. Yeah.
We do have to switch gears a little bit as we wind down. Every episode, we have rapid fire questions. The first thing that comes to mind, as succinct as you possibly can. The first one is, what are 3 things that you hope to bring to each coaching session?
3 things. Okay. A level of calmness, curiosity, and compassion.
And what are 3 things that you hope clients take away from each session?
Oh, eat 3 things. That's easier. They always leave with a higher sense of energy, right? Away from depletion, closer to repletion or replenishment. That's one. I like them to have the courage to affect the change that they want. Take that first step, right? Do it. Just do it. The courage to take that first step. And then the third one is and curiosity about themselves. Oh, wow, I didn't realize. And thank you, Douglas, for helping me see that. So yeah, I think that is 3 things I would like my clients to have after each session.
For someone listening today, what is one thing you hope they take away? Just like a summary.
Okay. There is always more than one way to respond.
How can people connect with you after this?
And you can always find me at IOC. I'm visible on the LinkedIn. I have a profile there. Or you can find me on my website, which is called viewadvisors.com. view-advisors.com.
Sweet. Thank you so much. And also get your contact links in our show notes as well for anyone who wants to check in and see what you're up to.
Thank you, Douglas. It was really great to be with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you both. Thank you. This has been fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Coaching Revealed, brought to you by the Institute of Coaching. You can learn more about the Institute on our website at instituteofcoaching.org. You can stay up to date with new episodes of our podcast by liking and following Coaching Revealed. You can also find us on social media on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X with the handle Institute of Coaching. We also love hearing from our guests, so please reach out to us with thoughts you have on this episode and any questions you have about coaching. Until next time, this is Emily Tarani with Coaching Revealed.